Hey, I'm Rachel Billingsley.
And I'm Luke Billingsley, and this is GMT Talk, our insider podcast where we talk about all things GMT.
Today on GMT Talk, we will be interviewing the father of the coin and the Levy Campaign series, Volko Ruhnke, an accomplished designer and friend of GMT.
Volko has published over 14 designs and co-designs with GMT, and his newest design, Coast Watchers, is available now for pre-order with GMT's P500 program.
Hi, Volko. Thanks for being here. We appreciate the time you're taking to come and chat with us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Rachel. Hi, Luke. And let me just say at the beginning, thanks for everything that you both are doing to keep the extended community around GMT connected. I'm a big believer in something Peter Perillo wrote, which is wargaming is communication, but fundamentally. And so for us to succeed in this endeavor and to really enjoy it, communications is key. So thank you for all that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's kind of you to say.
But it's true.
I do enjoy doing that, connecting the various people and kind of helping everyone out with making their games more widely represented, I guess. I don't know how to explain what the marketing department does fully, but
well, this is and I don't know if all designers feel this way, but for me, of course, just designing is a joy. It's different from playing. It's kind of like playing games, but it's a fun thing. Just doing it. It's probably therapeutic too. But at the end, what I really want most in the world is to have people playing the game and hopefully playing it enough, and enjoying it, enjoying the games, as you say, so they'll want to play it again. And if I see that, then I'm like, oh, this is great. That's what I crave,
Right.
And so it really is connection out there. If I just did this in my basement and in the end it looked beautiful, or if it's published and it all sits in your warehouse, that's kind of a fail.
Yeah.
So that getting people into it is, that's fundamental to, for me at least as a designer, the key goal, the key output. And this is like any kind of medium. I think games are like this, like any kind of medium. It's really the thing, whatever it is, what comes in the box, and then how people are interacting with it, right? Every player brings something different to the table and interacts with that game. And in that way is interacting with me as the designer. And so I want to have as many different people everywhere doing that with me. That's what it's about for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The community that gathers around the thing can sometimes be as fun as the thing itself.
I think it's inseparable. I mean, unless, what is the thing then? It's a kind of a dry, dusty thing, right? That sits in the dark in the closet and has no friends.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it's lifeless. It's lifeless without the players who come to it and use it, experience it, take it in whatever direction. They're different. Everybody's interpreting it differently. It's that way with history. Everybody who sits down with a GMT game that's in a historical setting already knows something about that history. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, maybe something in between, and it's all different, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're creating something in their own imagination if they're playing alone, or with their friends if they're playing together. They have the game as a kind of a shared framework, but what they're creating, the story that they're then making and imagining, telling their own story, is different every time, right? It's the thing. It's the actual thing we're interested in. That shared experience, including me, the designer. I'm kind of in the room too, quietly. Yeah.
I love
That's
that.
really cool.
Man, that brings me joy to hear people playing it, but also the designers seeing people playing it, and the joy that brings you guys. I just love it.
100%.
That's why we do what we do. So it's great.
Yeah.
So the first game that you did with GMT, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was Wilderness War. And your second game was Labyrinth. Okay, I remember playing Labyrinth for the first time
As a
when I was in high
designer, I
school.
did some development in between.
Okay.
But as a designer, that's right.
I played it for the first time in high school, Labyrinth, I believe, at the Weekend at the Warehouse against my dad. Can't remember if it was in playtesting or if it was released at that time, but I do remember that I beat him, and I've never let him forget. So he's beat me a few times after that, but that
And
doesn't count.
he decided to print the game anyway.
I know, somehow, even though I beat him, he still decided to print it. So
That's like the test,
that's a win.
though, right? It's like you sit down to play test. Everyone beat Gene.
That's true. That is the test.
Yeah, my two boys, they're in their 20s now, but all throughout from Wilderness War on, certainly Labyrinth, they were my first line play testers. I'd play it with them, whatever I've had in the cooker. And if they enjoyed it and wanted to play it again, then I was like, okay, I probably got something here that's fun. And it was the same with Labyrinth. They were the first to play it, and they liked it too. And I never beat them. I don't know if this is a thing with dads and kids. I don't know how it is with your dad, but both of my sons, it doesn't matter what side I play, what game I lose. We've been Andrew, my younger son, and I have lately had the opportunity to play. We're on our 5th game in a row of Dune War for Arrakis.
Oh, okay.
And we switch sides each time. I'm 0 for 4, and I'm going down fast in number 5. It doesn't matter what I do. And in fact, I told him last night, I said, what's frustrating is not that I can't beat you, but I'm losing faster each time. Like, you're learning faster than I'm learning even. So I don't know. Is that a dad thing, or am I just not a player? I'm not sure.
I haven't experienced that yet with my almost 2-year-old, but maybe.
Well, wait.
She'll beat you eventually.
Now you know what you have in store. Get ready.
Yeah, a bunch of pain losing to her in games. That's funny. I think maybe the first time I played Labyrinth with Dad, I beat him as well. But then I couldn't beat him after that, so it might have just been beginner's luck on that one.
Know your enemy, I guess.
Yeah, right. So we've done Labyrinth, we've done the Forever War, we've done what's the
Awakening?
The Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any additional? Yeah, do you have any additional expansions planned, or is the series over?
So no, I certainly don't. So Forever War, the Awakening first, and then Forever War. I mean, that is Trevor Bender in consultation with me. He came to me, but that is his work, and I think fantastic. And for me, it's just like, wow, cool. My model that my historical model, simplification on the tabletop that I came up with in 2009 or so. Okay, it was you could add to it, as Trevor did brilliantly, and still have it represent continuing history. So I thought, okay, that's kind of a feather, in the cap. But how he did that's Trevor. And we had a talk in San Diego. I want to say it was, I don't know, it might have even been the year before last, but the last time I was in San Diego for SD HistCon. And we talked about, should there be another volume? And so my sense of it is, I don't know for sure what he's going to do. But my sense of it is that we kind of have the coda on the story. We've kind of told the story. And even though it's the Forever War, it's not really the Forever War now. I think once the coalition pulled out of Afghanistan, for me, the kind of global nature, it's not to say that ISIS isn't still there. It's not to say that jihadism and certainly terrorism isn't a threat, and that there aren't efforts against it, and the U.S. forces and others are active in counterterrorism missions in lots of places. But as a coherent global ideological struggle, which is kind of the premise of Labyrinth, is that for that time, from 9/11 on, the global ideological struggle that was concerning at least U.S. security policy was the fight against jihadism. The premise, and that's the premise of the game that your dad asked me to design with Labyrinth, because he commissioned that. I think that is not the case. It could be again, but is not the case now. And so sort of the case for a third add-on expansion doesn't seem to be there for me. And there's, and I don't want to, put any pressure on anybody by saying any specifics, so I won't. But there's an other project that I know Trevor has that I would be like, I hope you'll do that, spend your time on that, because I think that would be more interesting. But like I say, I don't want to, obviously presume to commit anything.
That's exciting though.
Yeah.
Can we go back a second and dig into you saying that Gene commissioned you to do Labyrinth? I don't think I knew that. It wasn't just your own passion project.
Oh no.
Wow. Okay.
Far from it. No. I had done Wilderness War, as you mentioned. That was 2001 publication. And I did some, as I mentioned, I did some development. I co-developed Reds with Ted Racer, and then Sword of Rome with Ray Farrell. And then I got a work assignment that was pretty serious hours, and just kind of took, and I just basically stepped out of, it was the only time since I was a kid that I actually stepped out of board gaming completely for a time, for a couple of years. And then when I came back, I was going to the conventions. And so I was going to Consim Expo in Tempe, where I always saw your dad as well. And it was in 2009, I think it was. So it would have been May 2009.
Okay.
And he said, so we just were having conversations, about the war in Iraq, about jihadism, things like that. So we were just having conversations. And he said that if I could design an intelligent game on the conflict with jihadism, he thinks he could sell that. Mm. And I said, well, I think what I would do if that was the case, what I would do is I would start with Twilight Struggle, which is, clearly a great design and a success, which is, the premise is there's a bipolar ideological struggle going on, the Cold War.
Yep.
What is that struggle today? I think a reasonable premise is the conflict with jihadism is the new version of that, of the Cold War against Soviet communism. And we could start with Twilight Struggle, but then of course it'd have to be different because today is different, and jihadism is different, and so forth. And the war on terror is different than containment, and so on. Anyway, so that's what I endeavored to do. And right there, he said, Gene said, your dad said, and if you have the guts, or some such, if you have the guts, design it so that you can play it solitaire as the US side. Because I, Gene, am concerned that this was 2009, right? So it's still like, things are underway. Like Iraq is not looking good yet. No, at all. I won't even say yet. It was still a crisis. He said, I'm concerned that no one will want to play the bad guys. No one will want to play the terrorists. So you have to be able to play the game. All right. Or, he didn't say you have to. He doesn't ever tell me I have to do anything. But, it was sort of a challenge, and I'm like, I've never designed a solitaire. Well, whatever. Anyways, so I went home. I designed based on that. I actually, on summer vacation with the kids, with my two boys, tried out a prototype. We had a prototype, and it ended up getting printed in, I think, late 2010, early 2011, something like that. Anyway, and right away, it was out. Right away, people said, how come I can't solitaire as the terrorists? Right away, they wanted that. Right. But what we found out, see, now Gene's going to make it seem like he's all smart and he knows people want to play solitaire and all that, right? But he was right, but not for the right reason. It wasn't that people don't want to play this side or that side. It was that so many GMT fans want to be able to play solitaire, even a card-driven game. So I'm not John Butterfield, I didn't design these big, complicated solitaire games back to the 1980s. I didn't know anything. I had a piece of paper. I sat down, I was in a library, I remember, public library, piece of paper. And I'm like, well, if I have to plot out a simple decision tree for the jihadists in Labyrinth, what would that be? And that became these obnoxious flowcharts. right? That will be familiar to people who used to suffer through them before you came up with the excellent, card-driven versions of coin series bots that you have now. But this is back then; it's old technology, and then for the coin series, which was sort of I'd learned some lessons from doing Labyrinth that I applied in the coin series, and there I said I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it for 3 other players, not just 1 other player. Can I do that? It was kind of another, challenge to myself. Yeah. And so that's how you got the original coin bots.
Wow. Cool. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
I do love that even in the first few games, you can play with 3 bots successfully. I mean, that's not something you could do in every game. So that's pretty cool to me, at least.
Yeah. I mean, with some pain, you can make it work. And it was that idea that can I replace 3 players around the table and make it seem like you're playing 3 other players. And that's a different design exercise than designing a solitaire game from scratch that's intended to be a solitaire game, right? These Labyrinth and the coin series are originally respectively 2-player and multiplayer games. And then if you want to replace any number of players, maybe just 1, with a simple algorithm, a flowchart in the early cases, you can do so. And I think by the time we got to volume 2 in the coin series Cuba Libre, the expectation was, well, now you should be able to play anybody. Why can't I have a 4th bot? Why do I have to play the government if it's Andean Abyss volume 1? If I'm a player, why can't I? Where's the government bot? It's just like, where's the US bot in Labyrinth, right? So with help, because now we had enough folks involved through this community, through communication, we had enough talent involved that could, that did that. So we'll have a bot for everybody. And so you can actually run Cuba Libre with 0 players.
Wow.
And which sounds like dreadfully dull exercise in flowchart operation. But people have actually done that. Now, I don't think they had fun doing it, but they did it to see if it would work. And it does work. Creakily, but it works.
So the coin series, it now has, I believe, if we've done our math right, 11 volumes released and 4 more on P500, and then a spin-off series as well. Do you have a favorite game? Or one that you like to play a lot?
Yes. This on number 2. I'll tell you what that is. I mean, a favorite game is tough for me because it's kind of like, which of your children do you love the most?
Right.
Or grandchildren in this case too. But I will say that one thing that got me playing again, coin series again, was Rally the Troops with Andean Abyss. And Andean Abyss, which of course it has a special place in my heart because it's the first one. It's the one that had to struggle out of the crib that that nobody wanted. And your dad got on Consim World. Do you know that he got on Consim World once when Andean Abyss Volume 1. So Labyrinth, Wilderness War was out there. Labyrinth had done well. He had commissioned me to do Labyrinth. I came back and I said, okay, I did the game you wanted. Now let me tell you what I want to do. I want to do Insurgency in Colombia. And he was like, okay, fine, Volko, you can do that. And then it didn't do well on P500, right? It was strong on P500. And so Gene got on Consim World and said, Volko's seems like a pretty, good guy and a good designer. He's had some good games. How come you're not ordering this game? So basically invited 100 different people to say why you should not buy this product.
Yikes.
Right? And with the exception of one, there was a pretty consistent answer as I don't care about Colombia. Was kind of the answer. One person had a strikingly different, but anyway, that was the trend. So it struggled. So it finally made it despite all of that. And now, as you said, we have this series and ICS and everything else. And it's a whole community on Discord, for example, around it, which is just wonderful. What a pride and joy for me. So that has like a special, like this was the kid that made it out of the rough neighborhood, to make good, right? Is Andean Abyss. And now it's on Rally the Troops, and you can play it correctly with a beautiful user interface for free with no advertisements. And so I did go back and play a good amount of Andean Abyss on Rally the Troops because it is such a joy to experience on that platform by Tor Anderson, just a genius guy who does this out of love. He doesn't want any financial job aspect to it. He just does it as a passion. And he never sleeps, eats, works, or does anything else but support Rally the Troops. So, it doesn't matter what time it is in Sweden. If you ask a question on Discord, he will answer. He will. You find a bug, he will fix it. He's an amazing guy. I got to know awesome recently. It's sort of just anyway. So that was kind of the one that I've played the most recently for that reason in the coin series.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I love how. I mean, just this like the theme of this episode. The community just grows around these games, and that's kind of the richness and the joy is experiencing that community.
So that is it.
Yeah. And like you said, the coin series community has blown up, and there's the Discord and all this kind of stuff. So then when you came and proposed Nevsky, and that, I don't know if you knew at that time that it was going to be a series or if it was just a new game.
Yeah. Well, my original, when I pitched Andean Abyss to your dad, part of the way to get, so I said, but don't worry. Yes, I know it's Colombian insurgency. Who cares? But one, it's going to be solitaire, Gene. They can play it solitaire. I'm going to give you solitaire. And two, it's going to be a series. So if you can just sell the one, you can sell more. Anyways, so I knew that was a selling point. So it was the same here, that I did know it was a series. And like with the coin series, I had my plan of 4 volumes.
Okay.
Like the coin series originally was going to be 4 volumes by me, done, right? Yeah. One on each continent. Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. That was like the original idea. And, most of those games never got made because of the community, because other people stepped in, other talent came in and said, well, I've got an idea. And I'm like, yeah, that's a better idea. Go, let's do that. And Levy Campaign ended up the same way. So Nevsky was going to be volume 1, and I was going to do, that's sort of in the northeast of medieval Europe. If you think about medieval Europe and you include the Holy Land in that, then the corners, I was going to do a Scotland one, Spain, Moorish, Andalusia one, southwest corner, and a Holy Land one, like Saladin or something like that. Done. That was the concept. And so I did have it. And I thought, because of that, I'm going to call it not coin series. I'm going to call it Medieval Warfare series. That was my name. And I was talking to your dad about it in San Diego again. And he said, well, with this system, could you do Rommel in the desert?
Huh.
That was what Gene asked me. And I said, no, Gene, you don't get it. This is about the feudal system, but
the supply
right. And how logistics worked and how command relationships, the command cards in the game are about the fact that this is not a modern general staff. It's a hierarchical system in a sense, but it's loose. It's based on personal ties and things like that. Trust and poor communication. Anyways, so no, it's about limited service obligations, not total war, and so, but the purpose of his question was, well, how far can you go? Right. Okay. So maybe not World War II, but what would it encompass? So he's looking ahead, right. In a way that I can't. And the answer to that was really any pre-industrial operational setting especially where limited obligation of service comes into play, which is many of them or most of them, mercenaries, limited enlistments, the American Revolution in terms of the Continental Army and so forth. So that took me to maybe I should not preemptively draw the boundaries around the series with the name medieval.
Right. And
that's how it became Levy Campaign, because the system, the point of the engine is first you're going to levy your stuff, and then you're going to take your stuff on campaign and go do something with it, right?
Gotcha.
Levy and campaign, and which is the two halves of the sequence of play each turn.
Cool. So my question about Levy and campaign is, how did you go about the team building for, all these different designers, like you said, who've now stepped in?
Yeah.
Surely it didn't just happen.
No,
right?
It didn't, and nor did I really envision it. It didn't just happen, but it also wasn't a plan. Okay. Because again, I thought, so here was my thinking, in terms of what I want to do, because I'm just doing this for fun. This is not my living, right? So I do what interests me. And I did Labyrinth because your dad challenged me and made me feel like you ought to be able to do this. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I make my living thinking about these things. I should be able to design a game about it. So I did Labyrinth. That's it. Now that I've done that, I'm going to do, what am I really interested in? I'm really interested in Insurgency. I happen to be at the time,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that. But with Colombian Insurgency, another thing I knew this was going to be hard to get the usual audience to be interested in because it was off the beaten track. And so one of the other things I wanted to do to lure more people into it with the coin series was have it look more like the kinds of games that most people play, not just old, Avalon Hill fans from the 1970s like me, right? So area movement, wooden pieces, all the rules you need on one player aid sheet or a couple, that kind of thing, and wonderful tutorials, in this case from Joel Toppin, who was the developer on Andean Abyss, to get people into it, to say, hey, I know this sounds like a really weird, kind of strange, unpleasant topic, but look how cool this game looks. It would actually, come on in. And then for them to discover that it's really an interesting setting after all, right? Yeah. So that was kind of part of the pitch too. And what we see now, especially with Cuba Libre, I'm so happy to say, like, I just was watching Foster the Meeple.
Oh, yes.
A couple of videographers from Halifax. I got to meet them in person at Circle DC recently as well in DC. And they did a video on each of their top 10 heavy board games. Dominant Species shows up prominently, by the way. Cuba Libre is in there. And I'm like, that's so cool that, folks who are, out there in the normal mainstream, not just weirdos like me, are enjoying the coin series. So I think that's just wonderful. Anyway, so then I thought, okay, I've done that with coin series. Now for Levy Campaign, what became Levy Campaign at the time was Nevsky, was all I had, was I'm just going to do something that's, grognardy, grognardy, whatever. It's just going to be obscure military operational logistics, battle, command and control. And I'm just going to, hope that it sells enough for GMT, but I'm going to do it because it's what I'm into. And I'm not going to worry so much about, whatever opening to the world. And I was delighted to see that actually there was a lot of interest in that.
Yes.
Maybe it was a different group with coin series, maybe overlapping, but Nevsky, I think, did better than I was expecting. And including in what you just mentioned, which is attracting talent.
Yes. And
so I started having multiple email correspondences with folks like Justin Facino, working Turks versus Byzantines, Mark Greenwald, who was doing a semi-naval conflict in Lauria, via friend of mine seeing a post on Italian Facebook with Enrico Cerbi, who was doing kind of versions of counters for Nevsky and kind of playing around, that I got in touch with him to do a game with me that became Inferno Volume 3. So I had these multiple email threads going. Paco Gradaisha, who was working on Plantagenet, which is now Volume 4 out there, he started a Discord server for Plantagenet. He started a Discord server because this will help us find playtesters, which is always a big challenge to get folks who are willing to do this. It's hard work. It's frustrating because every time you print out a set or test something, the designer changes stuff, and you have to start over. It's kind of unsung hero work. Anyway, so and it's the key to quality of the product, at least with regard to the game design itself. And so we're always looking for how do we, get more playtesters with us and keep them with us. And so he started a Discord server, and then I just thought, well, I knew about the Coin Series server, and I knew there was a GMT Discord server, and I'm like, let's just do the same thing for all these different threads that I'm individually communicating with these other designers within Levy Campaign. Let's just have a whole Levy Campaign, and we can all work together. And that was magic. Magic.
Yeah.
Because that's what these folks did. They worked on each other's, they're doing it now. They're working on each other's stuff. It's a community, and everybody's, into the whole project.
Yeah.
And so we're learning together. And I feel like with every design project I do, every volume within a series, especially, I learn and I get better. And now it's not just me learning. It's cross-pollination in a very efficient, friendly kind of way. So now I think if you ask me right now, if I could have one social medium and I had to give up everything else, YouTube, Twitter, it would be Discord. Discord right now for me is the most productive, valuable social media platform for things like the Levy Campaign Discord server.
That's awesome.
Right. So we have the Coin Series. We have the Levy and Campaign. I cannot say this name. I don't know why. Levy and Campaign Series. And so now your newest, you've got a game about Allied intelligence teams and Japanese hunters in the Pacific, Coast Watchers.
Coast Watchers.
What inspired you to start this design project?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So that is a long story.
Okay.
And so I'm going to try to give the short version. Okay. So I used to work in intelligence, used to make my living that way. And in the last part of my career, I used games in the classroom to teach analysts, and including designing and co-designing games for that purpose. And I co-designed a game that supported analysis that helps locate and bring fugitives from the law to justice. So it's an analytic endeavor. So I did a game on that called Kingpin, set in modern Mexico. And I did it together with, so I was kind of the game engineering guy, and I did it together with a substantive expert in doing that kind of intelligence work. And I learned some from that experience. It was something that was built for the classroom. It was built for certain learning objectives. It wasn't really something that would work commercially, but out of that came some ideas, mechanical ideas, that I thought would work commercially. So I was looking for that kind of story in history. And I'm, going back to Wilderness War, of course, I have a fondness for 18th century history. And so that was the birth of a little game design called Hunt for Blackbeard.
Yes.
And which is currently with Fort Circle Games in art. And hopefully we'll go forward this year. We'll see. But that little game, Hunt for Blackbeard, was about a Royal Navy effort to bring a fugitive, a pirate, to justice, at least in the Royal Navy's view. There's a lot of different political views, one or the other, but fundamentally, mechanically, that's what was going on. And I designed a 2-player game that used hidden information in a certain way to bring this manhunt for the pirate to life on the tabletop. And then having done that, I learned lessons from that I thought, here is a way to use specifically blocks, which of course have been around for forever in history games, but use blocks in a different way to solve some age-old problems with regard to denial and deception with hidden information that I could apply to other things. And how about specifically intelligence network game, a game about running an intelligence network, a collection network in the field in wartime, because I like military history. And, I like Pacific World War II. I'm interested in that topic, as many GMT fans are. And I thought the Coast Watchers are famous in a way, but in terms of games, they've always if they're there in the South Pacific, they've had a cameo role. Like in, like in Mark Herman's Empire of the Sun, they're in the game, they're a card. They're like an event card, right? How about a whole game about them, where you're not fighting the war, you are operating the intelligence network, or as you mentioned, your Japanese security forces, you're hunting and trying to at least, so if you can, capture, at least disrupt, or have your military activities avoid this intelligence network, to slip through that intelligence net. And that's what the game is about. That's Coast Watchers.
Sounds so interesting.
Really cool. So, yeah, I do too. So how would the campaigns work in Coast Watchers?
So when you say campaigns, there are actually specifically campaigns, which are the larger, put several scenarios together. So more generally, let me talk first about the scenarios, because the game has 15 scenarios.
Okay.
The first two of which are like little learning teachy games, little like practice games. They're short practice games. But then 13 main full-bodied scenarios that I call situations that span January 1942, so the game is set in the South Pacific. January 1942, when the Japanese invade the South Pacific, take their base at Rabaul from the Australians and press south, and we have the Battle of Coral Sea, and then the Guadalcanal, American invasion. And then the Allied push back in 1943, especially Operation Cartwheel, that is trying to neutralize and surround the great Japanese base at Rabaul. So January 1942 to December 1943, that's the span of the game. And there are then 13 situations, which are like snapshots in time, like May 1942 or September, October 1942 or whatever, that set the military environment for the intelligence work, right? So you're not playing out the Battle of Coral Sea or the invasion of Guadalcanal. You're playing out the intelligence and counterintelligence struggle in the context of those military affairs. So the map is set up differently each time. And the assets available to the Coast Watchers and the Japanese security forces are different each time. And you just go in, and it's a fairly short game. It's, up to 2 hours, maybe, if you go with full length, 2 to 5 turns, depending. And the Coast Watchers are trying to do their thing, and the Japanese are trying to stop them and catch them. And then you resolve, possibly the Japanese launch some operations, which is to say air and naval movements, but you don't really play out, for example, how effectively do the Japanese bomb Henderson Field or whatever. What you play out is that the Japanese are going to do that, and the Coast Watchers are providing tactical warning and have provided operational intelligence reporting ahead of that. And the Japanese then basically score more or fewer points, depending on how well the Coast Watchers have done, plus what the Japanese are trying to do, which is take the Coast Watchers off the map, capture them, right? And so they get points for that, and various other things going on, because there was all kinds of stuff going on: rescue of downed airmen and refugees, recruiting of guerrillas, possibly, and that sort of thing. So anyway, so each of these situations, because it's a scenario sheet like you might be familiar with from, Combat Commander, say, that sets things up and tells you the story, and you play. But there are also campaigns, and since you use the word campaigns, there are 4 ways that you can link different trios of these 13 situations together to give a different kind of story from the early part of that period, the Japanese invasion, basically, the middle part, the battle for Guadalcanal and on the Kokoda track in Papua, and then the end part, which is the Allied counteroffensive. So there's one campaign where you're doing 3 situations in a row, and how you do in the first one influences the second one, influences the third one, and then how well you did overall determines how much you beat your opponent by. Okay, so that's those campaigns. There's one from the early, one from the middle, one, and then one that's kind of like, I call it ebb and flow, but it's sort of an early, a middle, and a late, so you can kind of play them all in comparison. Yeah, and all of that, those campaigns for the fanatics, right, has yet to be tested. We have, so again, I have a Discord server, of course, for Coast Watchers, and we have just great stuff happening there just about every day. And I have, through that, have some Australians involved, because of course, the Coast Watchers are a particular part of Australia's war history, military history.
Yes.
And so there's a very for me, exciting Australian interest in this project. And so there are a couple of gamers there, Todd Quinn and Glenn Rowley. They play face-to-face and online, and they are playing through all of these situations. I got their latest report this morning, morning my time, night their time. And they're up to situation L. So they play each one twice. So all of those situations to test, almost all of them have already been tested at least twice, plus what other folks are doing. So I'm feeling pretty good that the engine is running smoothly.
Yeah. And
now we're just kind of, tuning for peak performance, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then the new front is solitaire.
Right.
Yes.
Which we have.
Ah.
We have. So I will have some details for your next monthly update on that. But I just issued this morning on Discord, basically Coast Watchers Solitaire 2.0. And I'm pretty excited. So anyway.
Awesome.
That's
excited to see that.
So for the campaigns for the real fanatics, could you play all 13 just in order and have some kind of way to
to connect them? So I'm not proposing that. I'm an extremist, but even I have my limits. I mean, I thought about that, but instead there's the 15 situations. I remember I mentioned the first were kind of like learning games.
Got it.
The first one introduces kind of the core activity. The second one introduces other stuff that's going on around that. And then starting with the third, which is situation B, you're putting everything together and marching through time. So the situations themselves from 1st to 15th are designed to be played in order if you want to gradually learn. There's a kind of a programmed instruction that's kind of baked in to these historical situations, mainly in that I'm giving the players a little more agency each time to set up their forces and assets. And so this is trying to get at something that it's a challenge learning. This comes up in Levy Campaign. It's a reason Levy Campaign is harder to learn than I would like. And we ultimately came up with ways that kind of flip the order in which you have to do things or help you get going. If you have like a lot of options in a game, like here's a deck of cards, you can have any 3 cards you want. Or here's all your forces, you can set them up anywhere you want, that kind of thing. Here's a bunch of points, buy whatever forces you want. If it's that kind of thing, that's really cool. That's like very sandboxy, right? That means I can explore all kinds of different ideas and strategies. It'll be different every time I play. Great. But the first time, you get what I call menu shock. You're like,
yes.
What do I do? I don't know this deck. What 3 cards do I pick out of 52? I don't know. Coin Series is a little bit like that because you've got each faction has that Chinese menu where you have column A, your actions, your operations, your basic stuff, and column B, your special activities or feats or whatever. And it's like, okay, pick anyone from column A and then match it with one from column B. None of those directly give you victory points. This is how you score victory, go. And it's like, what do I do? And what happens is players will often, you're flipping up a card and you can, instead of all that, just play the event, right? You can do. I'm like, well, I don't know. That's too difficult. I'm just going to play the event because they wouldn't put this event in here if it wasn't good. So I'm going to do it, right? And you end up, it delays learning that menu because you just got to learn that menu. And that's just for one side, right? Okay, so that's menu shock. So how do we get past it? So in Coast Watchers, that's introduced gradually across those situations, right? In the beginning, a lot of stuff is just dealt to you. And here's what you get. Work with it, the best you can. Later on, you get to pick and choose more. Mm-hmm. So my idea is the way that my Australian friends, Todd and Glenn are doing it there in Canberra, is you would actually play the whole thing in chronological order if you wanted, because there's a learning benefit to that. It makes it more comfortable. Because by the time you get to situation L and you have a lot of choice, what to pull to do you're going to know the game pretty well if you get that far into it, right? So you could do that, but it's not the case. And then you could keep track. You could say, well, we played these 13 and I won 8 of them. So I win the campaign. You could do that. But in terms of linking them with a board state like effects, that's only these trios of the 4 campaigns.
Got it.
Gotcha.
That until, if it's out there and people like it and they want to have that, well, you could, commit yourself to playing, 15 situations as one campaign and not be done. Yeah, then we can come up with, it could be done. I could write it or somebody else will probably.
Right.
Well,
if it gets out there, but first, first it has to be printed. So.
Well, that's very true. I mean, for me personally, though, I really like hearing that because I'm not a very, I guess you could say, I don't like high difficulty level games. So learning it in that order would be so helpful to me. Just one more thing every scenario or something like that. It's just a few things at a time rather than, what did you call it? Menu shock? Yeah.
Menu shock that is what I call it. Yeah. Because I kind of came from Coin Series and the idea of Chinese menu and sort of like, there's all this, I don't know,
Right.
And because the responsibility, and I know this from the classroom, from professional training, right? That it's frustrating for students because, you're with your peers, you're with the instructors, you want to do well. Games measure performance. The kind of games we play, board games, measure performance. And so you kind of feel on the spot that if you're telling me I should be able to pick 3 cards out of that whole deck, there's some best solution and I'm supposed to figure it out. Now I got to go through all these cards that,
right.
Nobody learns that way, right? Rather, you'll get there where you will, because you've played the game enough. You do know all 52 cards, right? That absolutely happens. That's down the road. And now somebody said to you, guess what? Instead of getting a random deal of 3 cards, you get to choose what you like. Now it's like, oh, that's cool. Great. Because I know which ones I love because I've been playing with them for a while.
Yeah.
In the beginning, that's a pain. I think for me too, like you say, Rachel, that's a pain. I'd rather just, I don't know. I'd like to discover what's in the deck. Deal me 3 and let's go,
Yeah. I like that. I've gotten myself a little off track here, but so our next, this is a little bit more in the weeds. Within each scenario, I guess I should say, or situation, how would the allied player kind of bluff or misdirect the Japanese player about where the Coast Watchers are? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's an intriguing question and deserves a detailed response. And I will try to keep it only minimally theoretical and as brief as I can. But it deserves a kind of two-part answer, and I'll explain why. So going back, what I'm interested in this mechanically in Coast Watchers, going back to Hunt for Blackbeard and the earlier games set in Mexico, is indeed, it's denial and deception in intelligence terms. And denial means I've got some information you don't have, right? Secret, like a stood up block, right? That's denial. I can see it's a Coast Watcher, you can't. Deception is what you just described, which is I am going to let you see something, but not something else. And the something I let you see is going to mislead you to my advantage, right? So a key aspect of that is a channel, right? If all my information is secret and you can't get at it, I can't deceive you. I can deny, but I can't deceive. Right. So there has to be the ability to let you see. So what can the allied player who's running the Coast Watchers in the game do? So everything that the allied player actually does with the Coast Watchers, with the intelligence network, whether it's deliveries back and forth or observing to try to spy on Japanese buildups to report them back to headquarters, maybe to doing guerrilla attacks, whatever, everything they do, there's some risk of exposure. There's some risk that they succeed in the mission, but they get revealed because they've had to go someplace to do something dangerous, right? If they send in a plane to drop supplies, the Japanese might see the plane. They might even see where the supplies drop, and that's exposure, right? So that's kind of built into the system from what happened. And as the allied player, you get to choose. Where do I take those risks that might expose my Coast Watchers? And you could, to bluff or mislead, you could say, well, I'm going to do a lot of stuff over here in this part of the map, and I'm going to keep my stronger network on the other part of the map quiet for when I need it, for when the Japanese launch an operation and I want to reveal, aha, I've got a bunch of Coast Watchers here to, give warning against your air attack or something. So that would be an example. So that's part one. Part two, if you think about what the mission of the Coast Watchers was, it's actually not the allied player that has the greatest opportunity for that kind of deception. So what would you say in a nutshell? What are the Coast Watchers about? What are they supposed to be doing?
Trying to give intelligence and warning to the allied player about Japanese operations. Exactly.
They are collecting intelligence and warning information to deliver to the allies. It's passive. It's quiet. In fact, they were actively discouraged and banned from undertaking resistance operations because a lot of these folks were gung-ho. They were working with locals who don't like the Japanese and want to attack them. And they're not supposed to be doing that, so much so that the name of the program, the Coast Watching program, the code name of the program was Ferdinand. Ferdinand, which was this cartoon bull character who, he was supposed to be a bull to go in the bull ring and stuff, but he just wasn't into that. This bull was just wanted to sit under a tree and smell flowers, and except what happened is a bee stings him and he gets, he starts bucking around and everything. And they say, oh, this bull is really aggressive, So the idea was Ferdinand, meaning you're passive. You sit there quietly and smell the flowers. Unless somebody attacks you, then okay, now you can defend yourself, but you're not supposed to do anything. So think about that in its context of having a channel for deception. The Coast Watchers aren't supposed to be really deceiving the Japanese, except they're just trying to hide quietly, right? But their job, what you said, Luke, their job is to collect intelligence information that is a channel back to the allies. So it's the Japanese, actually, who have the larger possibilities, and the Japanese player can choose to try to mislead and bluff the Coast Watchers, because the Coast Watchers' whole job is to deliver accurate information back home. So if the Japanese can basically misdirect the Coast Watchers, they can possibly lure the Coast Watchers into a vulnerable position, get them to waste efforts against something that's not important, fool them as to whether or not what the Japanese are going to do militarily. And so how this would work is the Japanese player, as I said, runs the security operation against the Coast Watchers, sending out patrols, searching, trying to capture the Coast Watchers, all that stuff, trying to catch their deliveries with aircraft and ships, all that stuff. They're also influencing the larger Japanese military buildup and operations. Where do we mass our ships and planes? Where do we put supplies? Where do we build airfields? the Japanese player gets to control that too, within some assigned secret missions that are cards. And that's the activity that the Coast Watchers are trying to report. But for the Coast Watchers to get victory points, those reports have to be accurate. They have to be up to date, okay, at the end of the game. And the Japanese can switch them out. Now, not willy-nilly, it's effort. But the Japanese in this period did do deception operations where they would sail ships or fly planes somewhere that was to divert the Allies from the real emphasis of the attack. Okay, so you can do that in the game too, and the Coast Watchers then become the channel for that bluff or misdirection, that deception. And more than that, if the Japanese are searching an island, so the Coast Watchers rely on a network of friendly people around them to protect them, inform them, maybe help them gain supplies, whatever. Maybe fight off the Japanese, right? That's how human intelligence works. You're relying on people working with you who also live there, even if they're not exactly combatants. And so if the Japanese start beating the bushes for the Coast Watchers, like they're on this island and they're sending their patrols out to go find, so the Coast Watchers are going to hear about it, right? It's not really secret activity that the Japanese are doing. It's the Coast Watchers who are small and quiet who are able to stay secret. So the Coast Watchers on blocks, the Japanese patrols are open. You see where the Japanese are patrolling. And so that sounds like it's a disadvantage for the Japanese player, but it's also a channel. That is, as a Japanese player, I can put a patrol here, I can patrol over here, or I can patrol over there. And maybe I'm trying to misdirect you, the Allies, as to what I care about. Because I'm going to patrol over here, even though what I'm really protecting is quietly over there, right? So that possibly is there as well, because the Japanese player has that channel of where they emphasize their security operations.
Right.
And it might be because they care. They're protecting something there. That's why they're patrolling there. Or it might be just because, I'm going to send you a wrong signal about what I really do care about, and so on. So it's actually the Japanese player who has the more varied and more likely opportunities for bluff and deception in Coast Watchers.
Wow. You just blew my mind.
Theoretical answer.
I know. I love this.
That was the opposite of what I thought the game would be like. Well, I mean, just the opposite of how I thought, I thought the Coast Watchers would be the ones leading the bluffing and the deception, but it's actually the Japanese. So that's really cool. Very intriguing.
I've learned so much about this game just today. I love it.
Yeah, and I'm excited too for the possibilities of like table talk with your opponent. Of, whether it's at some point during the game or at the end, like, gotcha. See, I wasn't actually doing this. I was doing this.
Yeah. Afterwards, you get to you find out. And as I say, because it's not a very long playing game, you'll get to tell that story in the end, which I think it's very important for any games where there's a lot of hidden information and it's it's 2 players or more, not just solitaire. That is so important for the experience, is engagement, right? If everything you're doing is hidden, I mean, that may be accurate in a historical way, and it may be kind of cool because, you don't know what I'm doing, but then you're not sharing in that part of the story, right? Any block game out there, it's the story you're creating, as we were talking about before, that's so important. You're creating together, but a lot of your story is, I don't see it because it's behind your blocks, right? Or it's behind your screen, or you're writing notes, and that's kind of a pity for engagement. So what I find happens is at the end, everybody's eager to tell their story, right? If they're into the game, sort of like, well, let me tell you, when I did this, I really had that, but I didn't know that you had this. And, and we then give that exposition. We kind of pull up the screen and say, here's what's going on. Right. And so yes, it's very much my hope and my expectation that will happen in Coast Watchers as well, with regard to those hidden aspects. And because, for example, the Japanese are holding mission cards, but they're secret. The Coast Watch is trying to kind of maybe suss out what they know what the possibilities are, but they don't know what exact cards the Japanese are holding. And even among that, the Japanese player has choice which ones to actually execute, to build up for and execute. So all that comes out at the end. And so in that case, you don't want the end to be 3 days of playing later. You don't want the end to be 100 turns later. The end is 2 to 5 turns max.
Gotcha. That's great. I'm looking forward to Coast Watchers.
Thank you.
So we recently, I think in the customer update, Gene wrote about how you guys decided it's going to be the first in a series, with Draken, I believe, as the second.
That's
coming
right.
Once it's ready, when the time is right.
Yeah, or if.
Yeah.
I just want to remind your viewers, there won't be a volume 2 if there's not a volume 1.
That's
so
right.
It depends
and we will
on the
link it below. P500 order today. Do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, but that's right. Drachen, at least that's the tentative title. We'll see if that sticks, but it's the German word for kite.
Okay.
Also dragon, but it's for kite, like fly a kite in the sky. Yeah, Drachen. And the topic is reconnaissance at Verdun, 1916. So it's World War I, trench warfare with a focus on reconnaissance using the same core engine as Coast Watchers. And so what I'm proposing to call it is Recon series.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
I like
that. You can not answer this if you want to, because you can keep your blocks hidden. But if you want to talk about it, is there anywhere else that you envision the Recon series going?
You mean so what would volume 3 be?
Just any other ideas?
Yeah. So I don't have a clear idea of what I might do, and it might even be nothing. I don't know. But here's an idea, kind of a sense I have, that the way that these games use blocks and markers also to give opportunities for denial and deception, to deal with hidden information, is different than what we have in other historical games, as far as I'm aware, unique. And there are so many situations in history where that is important to the outcome of a struggle, let's say. Right? There are so many cases where intelligence or reconnaissance are really key to what's going on. And any such situation, especially if it's a case where it comes up that I might be looking somewhere that you don't know I'm looking, and I might see something about you or find out something about you that you don't know I found out. And now I have what's called information advantage. Not only do I know something about you that you didn't want me to know, you don't even know I know. Okay.
Yes.
So in that you can imagine the human situations where that's true. Many, right? Any kind of historical setting where that is true, or modern day setting. I think this engine would provide opportunities for gameplay that we may not have had in other designs. Okay. So what might some of those be? Well, certainly, if you think about naval warfare, where finding the enemy and who sees who first is so important. Other intelligence topics where information and hiding and gaining information would be two. Tactical land warfare, let's say pre-industrial, where cavalry reconnaissance, and who is it who's able to maintain contact with the enemy, and who's able to screen and prevent contact with the enemy, right? Those kinds of cases. So I don't know what a specific topic would be that I might be interested in for volume 3, which is, of course, that's like not just a dream, but a dream within a dream. That's like,
yep.
Right now it's how well can I get Coast Watchers to play solitaire? That's kind of front and center.
Sure.
Volume 1, but I think that there are many such topics that one could attack.
I can see that.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited to see the future of that. But first, yes, Coast Watchers. Once again, you can order it. We will link below. So before we let you go today, we have a couple of questions that we like to ask everyone that comes on GMT Talk. The first of which is, do you have a favorite game by another GMT designer?
Yes, I do.
Oh, got the blanket?
Here's the clue.
All right.
Combat Commander, and specifically Combat Commander Pacific.
Pacific.
Yes. So by the late and great Chad Jensen and his beloved developer Kai. Yeah, I think a Combat Commander, I would say, is almost certainly the GMT game I've played the most. And an awful lot of Pacific, which my own sense personally is that just as I try to learn from one design to the next, I feel like Chad and Kai learned between Europe and Pacific, and Pacific to me is a tighter design and ends up being, for me, more atmospheric still. So Combat Combiner and Tire and Pacific within that, I think, is for me my sort of favorite all-around war game. And if you count it in the CDG classes, it's the most common played, the CDG I've played the most, and I think it may be the GMT game I've played the most.
Wow.
I mean, I haven't counted, but that's just my sense.
That's a great choice. I think it's probably my favorite GMT game as well too. It's the first one that the first like non-Ivanhoe battle line small GMT game that I really got into. So yeah, I love Combat Commander.
And it pulls on so many traditions that are dear to me. So I kind of think of it as, squad leader plus upfront plus CDGs done right, with all the design decisions being, for me, the right ones, as I like to play them.
Yeah, it's a brilliant design. Okay, cool. Thanks for answering that. Who are one or two, or however many you want to say, people in the gaming hobby who've had a positive influence on your growth and development as a game designer, or just as a gamer?
Many multitudes. I'll just a couple of greats who stand out for me. So Chad is certainly one, and one aspect, something I feel like. So how Combat Commander is constructed and displayed, along with some other great designs, those of Ted Racer, for example, is a big influence on just how I write cards, for example, or how I envision laying out cards, that kind of thing, what cards can do. But another kind of aspect, a conversation I had with Chad and Kai once at a convention breakfast about theories. It was one conversation that was very influential to me on, how you proceed in a series, what you should and shouldn't do when your game succeeds and you have multiple series. And I was asking him why. I think we were doing the New Guinea battle pack for Combat Commander. I think Pacific. I think that was what it was. It was the topic. And I was like, why can't we put like more and more and more stuff? Shouldn't you put more and more stuff in each battle pack? And he said, no, the opposite. You don't want to just encrust everything with it. You want to, more, bigger's not always better. I even wrote an article with that subtitle for C3I, that you have to give people, when you get to, volume 10 or something like that, where you're doing battle packs or expansions or whatever, Forever War, you have to give players a reason for that additional one, right? What if I already have all 9 volumes? Why should I buy volume 10, right? There has to be a reason in there. It doesn't mean it has to be bigger. It has to be different enough, but it can't be so different that it doesn't even fit in the series. So there's this kind of fine line of how big, how small. There's sort of boundaries on that, and then sort of how different or same. And just to think about that in guiding, for example, the coin series. Chad was just that one conversation, but watching what they did, with the series, that series in particular. So another one is Mark Herman, and like so many of us, of course, I've read and listened to Mark Herman, and every time I get together with him, I tend to just listen to what he has to say. And of course, he has so much experience. Mark Herman was professionally designing war games when I was in high school.
That's cool.
And then one day we designed a game together, me and him. I mean, imagine that,
Amazing.
for young Volko. So I do tease him about his age, but it's okay. He's still doing very well. Mark it's just one. Here's just one aspect. Because he hits so many dimensions, and he got me thinking in a different way about the ethical dimension of, because I was doing games on modern topics, and of course he was as I was kind of in the professional world of national security and wargaming and that kind of thing. He was at a much higher level. I was at the kind of working on. He was a VP. But I was just doing a distant plane with Brian Train. So insurgency in Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan was still going on. People were dying. And here's a game for fun. And he gave me the advice that, when you do a game like that, think about what you do with your material gain from that, your royalties. And I took a page from his book, because he did this when he was, earning his Booz Allen VP salary. He wasn't taking the royalty. The royalties went to charity, And I just decided then I would do that. And I, picked my charities, which have to do with veterans affairs. And so all the royalties from those modern topics, distant plane, everything from Fire into the Lake, which is kind of, having done it with Mark Herman, is now seems its own like mini franchise, which is also wonderful. And I've stuck with that, and it makes me I just feel, I feel ethically joyous about that.
Yeah.
That these people suffered those episodes are still with us. Some of them are still suffering. Many of them are actually, surprisingly, who aren't, don't get the help that we should be giving them as a matter of course, and have to rely on organizations. In this case, in my area, Vietnam Veterans of America, for example.
Right.
And which is great work, but it relies on donations and dedicated volunteers. And so I get to be a part of that with donations from everything, Fire the Lake, Distant Plane, and Labyrinth goes to that. And that goes back to Mark and, conversations I had with him. And I guess one other I'd like to mention is Joel Toppin, and in the sense of, I think I did it when I did Labyrinth and Indian Abyss with Joel Toppin, and he was a great instructor, I think, of user interface, of how it's kind of getting back to this communication aspect. How do we present this material to somebody to whom it's not as familiar as it is to you, the designer, Volko?
Right.
And so many of the ways that Labyrinth and Indian Abyss do that, tutorials, for example, even board layout, go back to Joel. And you can see that kind of if you watch his videos on when he plays through something, you can see that he just has that innate talent of exposition, of giving you access to something that's actually complicated.
Yeah.
Awesome. I like that about Joel. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that about those people, for spreading the love. That's what we like to do. It's encouraging to hear about all the ways that those people have influenced you, and how each of those people, including yourself, have really done a lot of great things for the hobby, and for charity as well. So thanks for sharing.
Appreciate it. That's it for GMT Talk today. Thanks, Volko, for taking the time to talk with us and for being a guest on GMT Talk.
All right. We will see everyone next time on GMT Talk.